Our next speaker, Mr. Peter Van Ace, renewable energy banker and hydrogen business developer at ABN AMRO Bank NB. Speaking on today's topic, thoughts and learnings on the EU's hydrogen wrap-up, and read thoughts for Oman and the GCC. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor. I have a side function to mention. I'm also the chair of the Dutch Omani Foundation, the Netherlands Oman Foundation, a foundation that focuses on promoting cultural and economic developments between Oman and the Netherlands. And we do that as well in cooperation, of course, with the Dutch and Omani embassies in Muscat and in The Hague. So very happy to be here. Let me start by saying that ABN AMRO as a bank is not doing any business or banking in the Middle East or in the GCC. Very unfortunately, we decided to step away from our global operations in energy and focus on Europe. Nonetheless, I think there are a couple of interesting learnings for the Middle East and the GCC to take into account when developing a hydrogen economy, and also the tricks that Europe has applied here. Some of them will be useful as well in your region. Some of them won't. Let me start by saying that when it comes to financing, in terms of financing that Europe has set up a framework called the Green Deal. I'm quite sure that you are familiar with the fact that Europe wants to be a front runner when it comes to becoming climate neutral going forward, and has developed a policy instrument called the Green Deal. And Europe also has two development banks at its disposal, the EIB, the European Investment Bank, and the EBRD, the European Bank for, redevelopment, or reconstruction and development, I think it's called. And those two development banks are quite important when you want to finance as a bank new technology or newer technology sort of businesses, such as hydrogen and the development of the hydrogen economy. And the reason why that is that these development banks can take up some of the more difficult risk parts of any financing. And that means that banks can step in at an earlier stage because they know that the EIB and the EBRD can take care of some of the higher risk elements. And when I put it in financing terms, we call that subordinated loans. And you can see indeed the EIB in Europe and the EBRD outside of Europe acting as a subordinate loan provider, and that cushions and mitigates risks for private banks such as ABN AMRO. This is important as well when you want to develop a hydrogen economy, is that not only you have to wait for subsidies and the right regulation, but as well it would help very much if you have these development banks in place as well, as a sort of intermediate agent between government and the public sector. Next to that, we see a large interest developing in equity financings of the hydrogen economy. Many folks who are not per se in the hydrogen economy yet, but see the immense amount of traction that hydrogen in general at this stage is getting. A lot of equity is now sidelined and waiting for deals to come. And that also leads to, in some situations, absurd valuations of the few deals that are out there. Some of these hydrogen-related initiatives and corporations are already listed, for instance, at stock exchanges, and you see in some situations bizarre valuations for them. We want to, of course, be cautious here and want to state again that much of the developments that we have currently on our tables is pretty high risk and has a lot of technological unproven elements to it. Even though alkaline is already there for many years, and you might have done your electrolysis at high school or at college, it's not that electrolysis is a new process. But if we want to integrate alkaline electrolysis into integrated systems, including solar and wind power, including intermittency regulation, including security measures. That is relatively new at large scale, and therefore we as banks tend to take a more slightly backward position here, leaning back a bit. That doesn't mean that we don't do these deals at this stage, absolutely not. But we want to indicate to the market that the metrics that we currently see, some banks, if you ask them, can you, when developers are sounding out these banks are in some situations already giving you quite aggressive and attractive sort of formulas or metrics on which to finance your development, and think that hydrogen economy developments will can be seen in line with what we have seen for instance, solar and wind power generation, where you have, for instance, 90% debt financing versus 10% equity financing. That is not going to be the case with hydrogen. With development banks involved, we are much more thinking in lines of 70-30. And when it comes to debt service coverage ratios at a P90 level, we believe that 130, 135 is what currently is the running rate for financing your hydrogen activities, versus what we see in solar and wind, 1.10, 1.15, when you go to countries such as Spain. The lessons from the European Union, I will put them on, maybe I already did that. Let's have a look. Put them on screen.
Yeah, Peter?
Yeah. I'm going to put them on here. So the European process currently is set around a framework called IPCEI, Important Project of Common European Interest. And this framework is going to allow the member states to provide subsidies to the hydrogen economy. And you can imagine why Europe needs a framework such as this one. It's the third or fourth time that we apply this IPCEI situation to market development. At this stage, there is no real hydrogen market in Europe. Even though we produce hydrogen and we consume hydrogen, much of that is being produced and consumed on site in refineries, etc., or in the fertilizer industry, but there is no real market. And there is the market size is about 3 or 4% of overall production and consumption, and that is being dealt with via over-the-counter solutions. So therefore, the European Commission said, okay, if we want to develop this market, we need to have a framework that allows the European member states to start subsidizing this, because state aid under European internal market regulations is not allowed. So the member states have, at this stage, still a limited say in how they want to develop the hydrogen economy. Very much is being designed and decided upon in Brussels. And this IPCEI framework, we will see the first results coming out of this in the next couple of months. I believe it will take only 8 to 12 weeks before we see the first IPCEI wave to come out of the negotiations. And that IPCEI wave will consist a number of front-running large projects in Europe with an innovative focus, and in some situations even already an electrolysis focus. And that will start or kickstart the scale up and the greening of the current hydrogen production and consumption in Europe, and also of future additional hydrogen consumption and production. Just to make sure that you understand the numbers that we are talking here about, the Holland and Germany's hydrogen consumption at this stage needs already 25 gigawatts of additional wind power generation at 50% capacity utilization. That is quite a lot. That is quite a lot, and it's not easy for Holland and Germany to start adding these sort of amounts of additional power generation capacity to the existing power generation capacity. And therefore, we are contemplating, of course, importing hydrogen or green hydrogen from places outside Holland and Germany, such as Spain and Portugal, Morocco, but also further out, and Oman could be such a place. Please be aware that the cheapest way to transport hydrogen is via a pipeline, and there are some larger project developments going on that are trying to use the existing capacity of the European pipeline system. But we are also figuring out how to ship hydrogen, and many of you involved in the hydrogen economy know how difficult it is to ship hydrogen in the form of ammonia or LOHC, toluene, things like that, or cryogene tankers. It's all very expensive compared to the gas pipe. So this is something that that countries such as Oman or other countries in the GCC should have to take into account, that when they want to export hydrogen, they have to compete with potentially gas piped hydrogen that comes, for instance, from Spain via North Africa, via Tunisia, back to Italy, and then to the European system, or directly from Spain via France to the north. What I find important as well to stress in the minutes I still have is to state that consultants at this stage primarily take a financial sort of view. They want to have the model fixed and then say, okay, this is the model, and then we need this many subsidies, and then go out and ask your government for the subsidies. This is not how it works in Europe, or how it worked in Europe. In Europe, this was already well known, and there is a political and social view necessary as well with these consultants, since once the IPCEI process started, of course, the whole scale of the hydrogen economy became politicized. And when it becomes politicized, there is always this social element that comes to the fore. And what I mean with politicized as well is that some countries run faster, some countries run slower. But if those slower running countries are larger or have more political weight in the European Union context, then they can slow down developments just to make sure that their industry is also on board in the overall rollout. And that has led to some of the delays that we are currently facing in Europe. Since many of the projects currently debated under this IPCEI framework were already handed in to the European Union in 2020. So we are already a year underway with deciding how we are going to set up the proper subsidy framework. Last but not least, climate change is here. We need to act now. We have to stop consuming fossil fuels. One point I want to make for the GCC is that salination is also part of this exercise. And please be aware that if you want to export hydrogen to Europe, that Europe will ask, okay, so what did you do with the salt? And if the answer is, well, we threw the salt back into the Persian Gulf, or into the Red Sea, or into the Gulf of Oman, then Europe will have an opinion about that. So we need to figure out what we're going to do with the salt that we produce as a side product of green hydrogen production. And that's it from my side. Any questions, Melvin?
Yes, Peter, thank you very much for your presentation. So since you said you're also in the committee of the Oman and Dutch committee, there are a lot of things happening in related to energy with nexus of food and water and other things as well, correct?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I see a lot of, when we say Netherlands, there's a lot of focus on these three sectors: energy, food, and renewables and things like that.
Yeah, so it's energy, water, and food, I believe.
So how has it been the last 1 year? So what's the progress and on the plans and the discussions that have taken place so far?
Yeah, with regard to how the discussions with Oman are developing on that end, I'm not in a position. Yeah, exactly, the broader sense. I'm not in a position to say. What I do see is that when you take just the GCC, but also North Africa and parts of North Africa, especially Morocco and Tunisia, they also see a chance there. I mean, not only in terms of how can we secure our food supply, and what is sustainable food production, how does that actually look like? So the way Brazil is currently producing soybeans for the Chinese markets, yeah, of course, hurting the rainforests in the Amazon area. That is not sustainable food production the way we see it. On the other hand, there are a lot of technologies that you can deploy to make sure that your food production is indeed also sustainable or more sustainable. You know that Holland is the second food exporter in the world, even though we are a very small country. We still have a very big food production, but that also comes with pollution. We produce a lot of nitrogen pollution on the back of our food production, and we need to take care of that. And this is a big debate in Holland, and we need to make sure that we understand how we can mitigate that, because if you solve one problem while creating another, that of course is not going to help. And this is the same with your salination issues in the Persian Gulf. Personally, I'm quite keen on and involved in water scarcity management projects, and for green electrolysis, of course, this is key. I'm not a big believer in blue hydrogen for the time being, because of the social license to operate and the way it can easily get politicized, especially in a European context. And therefore, focus, I think, should be from the start on green hydrogen, and banks will be more inclined, European banks that is, will be more inclined to finance those green hydrogen projects versus the blue ones, even though many folks, of course, tell us you need blue hydrogen to get to green hydrogen. And recent reports, of course, I think you've seen them or heard about it, is that recent reports also indicated that there is so much methane leakage in blue hydrogen production, and methane is such a strong greenhouse gas, GHG gas. Therefore, we should also, from that end, stay away from blue hydrogen, maybe more than we are currently thinking. But yeah, as said before, the fact that we don't have the power generation, the green power generation in Europe available at this stage, also makes us in a way dependent if we want to ramp up the green hydrogen economy fast. Therefore, I believe that it won't go as fast as that many people wish it would go. And where would it start first? It will be used first in replacing the current production and consumption. That is heat intensive, high heat processes, refineries, fertilizers. The second part will be mobility, and we also believe that in that sense, mobility, it will be focused not on ordinary cars, personal vehicles, but on heavy duty buses and trucks, but especially buses. And why buses? Because that is something that is closer to the heart of government officials, and it's a way for them to do something themselves. And therefore, we see already at this stage that when governments want to act, that's a way to how they can act, because that is something they control. Versus, of course, truck companies that are privatized and that have a say of their own and also a way of dealing on their own. All right. That's a bit my answer to your question. Hope I a long answer to a short question, maybe.
Yesterday we had a speaker from Port of Rotterdam, and we saw some amazing developments in the port area on hydrogen and other prospects. Lastly, maybe a little out of context, EV, electrical vehicles, a little bit on energy.
Yeah. The European Union at this stage finds it not easy to allocate green power to the production of green hydrogen, because it is an inefficient process. The European Union states, okay, for the time being, we want green power to be consumed in the power consuming as power, for instance, charging EVs. And the way we see this development, and also my personal opinion at this stage, is indeed that electronic vehicles are, it's going faster than we thought. Also because on the back of the policy making, obviously, you need subsidies for that as well. But some countries are quite front running. Holland is one of them, also because of subsidies that we already awarded in 2016. So many of the cabs that you see in Holland, the taxis, are EV taxis. And that was also because of the subsidies. Will that continue? Absolutely. Do we see the OEMs, so the Volkswagens of this world and the Peugeots, do we see them ramping up production? Yes, they are. Will that change a lot of the, let's say, highway fuel station patterns and dynamics? Yes, because you can charge at home. You don't need to go necessarily to a fuel station anymore. Will there be front runners? Absolutely. Will there be losers? Absolutely. Will we be able to be green? Will we be able to green the economy with it? We need guarantees of origin for that. And there is the question, does the EU allow guarantees of origin to fuel your car green, or do you need to have real green production on site, which is a situation that we currently come across in hydrogen, where the European Union says, well, you are not allowed to use guarantees of origin to green your power production and then green your hydrogen production. The European Union states, no, you can't do that. You have to produce the green power on site and then create the electrolysis. That's the current situation.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and presentation, Mr. Peter Van Eyss. And we hope to meet you in Oman.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.